I've brought notes with me just to remember all the names that I'm going to be speaking about, but I do know this picture, which is me when I was about 5 years old, I think. My mum used to always buy all my school photos, no matter what they looked like. And this is probably one of the better ones, actually, I would say. But my photos generally are pretty bad, but she kind of always bought them, and it made me think about the imperfections and things that kind of people see past, which then made me think about the Japanese term, which is wabi-sabi, which is difficult to explain in kind of Western terms, I suppose, but for the Japanese it basically means seeing the beauty in imperfection and simplicity and in age. And then I considered how this applies to my everyday life. I live in Aberdeen, which is definitely a city of imperfection and occasionally oppressive architecture, and is maybe lacking in some elegance and charm in some places, and maybe, dare I say, creativity. But when I first saw it at night, and I thought it looked like Gotham City. I also saw it in the sun, and that's a rare occurrence in Aberdeen as well, especially for Dundonians, because you're the sunniest city in Scotland, I think, apparently. And when you see it in the sun, it's actually sparkling, and it does deserve the term silver city when you actually see it like that. So that kind of, when I was a student, made me think and feel really kind of happy to be in Aberdeen, but I became quite jaded living there for some time in all that granite, and forgot how good it can actually look. Recently, this is our big building, Marshall College, it got cleaned up. One side got cleaned up, and then the council didn't do the other part. And so that part remained very, very dark and grey. And that kind of made me think about the sort of imperfections again that you see in buildings and the contrast between the two. My friend came over from Japan, and she has quite a good handle on wabi-sabi. And she opened my eyes to looking at Aberdeen again, and she took these pictures, actually. Some really, really nice pictures that suddenly made me see the charm again within Aberdeen, and the kind of beauty within Aberdeen as well, and the craftsmanship that was going on. And things that I don't actually notice day to day, basically. And some of the buildings, like the spires that she took between the two buildings, were really beautiful. So I kind of then thought that, while considering this, I thought how it reflects my day-to-day practice. I'm a lecturer generally, and a freelance designer. And the notion that technical perfection is fine for robots, but sometimes the human element in our surroundings is far more engaging than the mechanical. And it took me back to Japan again. I'm a big fan of Japan, been over a few times. And I just thought about how they really handle craftsmanship and how they handle the beauty and imperfection. So even when you go to temples like this, the gravel will be kind of all set out beautifully, but they'll maybe kind of put some petals over it just to get some imperfection in there as well. So I started thinking about imperfection again within my own work. This is my laptop. And I thought about how all these kind of scars represent things like when I've dropped it, when I've used it as a tray instead of actually a laptop, when I scraped it across a desk when I got really annoyed with a student one day. So there's all these kind of things that I can see in the scars of the laptop. Speaking of students, one of my students a couple of weeks ago actually got really upset because she said her work wasn't perfect. And we kind of chatted about that and said that if she doesn't make mistakes and find imperfections in what she's doing, then she just won't move on, basically. So we kind of considered how this applies within Japan again as well. And I've got a quote here which I kind of said about finding the fingerprints in the work. But then these are actually eclairs in Japan, so I'm not so sure if you want to find fingerprints on your food when you're kind of looking at it. But it seemed quite good at the time when I actually looked at the quote. This one I really like. This is a beautiful print by Why Not Associates. They were looking at old posters, and they were then screen printing over the top with new work and new images. And again, it was the fact that the ink was reacting differently when they were actually doing the screen prints. And it was the beauty that they didn't know what was going to happen. It was this kind of imperfection again. And it was learning to kind of see things again. Same with Jen Southern. She was following a journey made by lots of people. I think it was exhibited in Dundee, but I can't really remember. Was it? Yeah. She had lots of tapestries that kind of tracked people's journeys. And there was a really beautiful piece that was actually there. I didn't get to see it, unfortunately. Then there's Aaron Coblin's work, hopefully. He uses crowdsourced data to build these really lovely images again using the imperfections of humans and just how this kind of creates imagery. This one is Burnout Smilled, who creates clouds. And I like the beauty of this and the kind of just the randomness of this as well. Again, there's the imperfection and there's just the kind of not knowing what's going to happen with the creation that you've actually got. And some beautiful kind of imagery that was created. I think there was lots of photographs displayed. And then I thought perhaps it would be beneficial if we learnt to encourage our naturally irregular thought patterns, like clouds. I don't know if you can quite see that, but that's the idea there. And like our thoughts, they're unrestricted by kind of linear rules and conventions, and they're kind of snapshots in time influenced by our changing surroundings. Which kind of takes me back to this again. Remember this photo? It's taking pride in your creation, I suppose, which maybe is what my mum was doing. I don't know, with all my hideous photos that I had. So despite the kind of unpredictability of the outcome, or the lack of elegance and the obvious chance, I think that's the reason that my mum possibly kept buying them. She kept kind of looking over them and this kind of repetitive feel to it, and looking back at them all the time. And the wabi-sabi kind of meaning is that something's interestingness, the quality that compels us to look at something over and over and over in repetition, isn't lost. Which then made me think again and took me back to the creativity in Aberdeen and realised that the more that I look at Aberdeen and the more I kind of see it from different kind of times and different places, I start to actually see the beauty and creativity going on in Aberdeen more, particularly with the Offset 57 that we're currently running, the kind of creative hub that we've set up. And that's that. Cheers. Thank you.